Hi you guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Charlotte. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Today we're going to do a deep dive into 13 fragrances sent over to me by the French perfumery house Teo Cabanel in this beautiful pouch here. If you get this pouch, by the way, online, it comes with a $25 coupon so that you can redeem, or like basically the value of this pouch with the fragrances in it, you can redeem that value in a full bottle purchase, which I think is just excellent, especially for a niche house. I don't see many perfume companies doing that. It makes the purchasing of a new fragrance very approachable because you get to sample all the fragrances and make sure that you really like the one you end up picking. I really took my time with these. They sent these like many months ago and I was really slow and taking my time with every single one of these fragrances. And also I shared these fragrances with my son, my 6-year-old son, and my partner. They had a lot of input as well, and they had a lot to say about these fragrances. So I wanted to share with you our nuanced sort of opinions about these fragrances, which one I think is full bottle worthy, which ones might be the right one for you. My son had a lot of really good things to say about these, so I'm excited to share that with you. He's only 6 years old, but you guys, he has a nose. He has a nose, and he has very strong opinions. So some of these were different than my opinions for sure, but I think it's interesting to note those. Yeah, I'm so excited to share these with you. Thank you so much to Teo Cabanel for sending the 2 favorite fragrances of mine, which I will feature at the end of this video. I'm actually going to work my way up from my least favorite all the way to my favorite fragrance. All of these are very high quality fragrances, that I can definitely say. Please let me know down below if you've tried Teo Cabanel, what your favorite fragrances are. If there's one that you would really like to try, I would love to know. There are definitely more hyped up fragrances in Teo Cabanel. For example, Café Cabanel has been making the rounds lately, but there's also a lot of fragrances that kind of have flown under the radar that are still worth checking out, you know? So let's get into it. All of these fragrances, I tested them out first on paper, and then the ones that I really liked, I tried and tested them out on skin, so I will have more detailed thoughts on those in terms of performance. Though it is hard to definitively determine that with a sample. I will just say it's a little bit hard to accurately gauge the projection, the sillage, all of that with a sample. So take that with a grain of salt, but I do have more detailed thoughts for the ones that I tested out on skin. The first one we have here, which was definitely not for me, was called Hegoa. And this is a fragrance that my son's first impression was that it smelled like a marker, but not like a Sharpie, like a marker for like a whiteboard. Very specific, you guys, very specific. Now, personally, I find that this has a very harsh citrus opening with a blast of green tea. It's not necessarily my jam. It's not my kind of thing. It's very green. It's very fresh. It's very fresh, spicy, and aromatic. It's a little bit too bitter and too green for me personally. I didn't really like it. I will say, however, that I don't mind the far dry down, which is just a little bit less green, but still smells fresh. So you guys, I'm not like the biggest green tea fan to begin with, but specifically this one, the green tea with the citrus was a little bit too sharp and green, and a little bit bitter for my taste. I gave this one a 5 on 10. My son gave it a 2 on 10 and finished by saying that it smelled a little fishy. So I told you guys, he's blunt, he's honest, and he doesn't always have the same opinions as me, right? So I hope you'll enjoy his little tidbits in here. I hope you'll enjoy his interpretation of these scents. So let's move on. That was my least favorite scent. Next we have Oha. This is a fragrance that I have to start again with my son's opinion. He said that it smelled like our local health food store. Very specific, I know. I'm not sure what he meant by that. Maybe it smelled herbal to him or something. I definitely get something very herbal and aromatic and a little bit aldehydic out of this one. Those were my first impressions. Slightly medicinal. There are no actual aldehydes in it, but that was my initial impression of it. I would say that the tea, the rose, and the cardamom are the most prominent notes to me, and I get a slightly soapy rose out of this one. This one definitely smells a little bit more traditional or vintage, but a little less complicated, a little bit less complex than a vintage traditional perfume, a little bit more rounded and smooth. I also found this to be a little bit musky and pretty overall. It was not my favorite though, not necessarily my type of fragrance, but it was not bad. I would still wear this. I gave this a 6 out of 10, and my son gave it a 3.5 out of 10. So you guys, yeah, he's the harsher critic here, I think. Although even the ones he really liked, he gave a low score. We'll get to those. But yeah, there you go. So overall, a little bit musky, soapy, rose, floral. Not really my cup of tea. Not my thing. It was just okay. I gave it a 6 out of 10. The next fragrance we have is Kasar. This is a very unique fragrance. It's not a fragrance that I would personally wear, but it's just so interesting and unique, and I do think it's the right fragrance for the right person. This is a fragrance that right away I was like, ooh, I'm getting oud and leather. Oud and leather. So bam, intense, in your face. I didn't even need to check the notes for this fragrance. Initially, that's what I got right away, was oud and leather very prominently. It's a very interesting woody fragrance. It is animalic. It's a very masculine, I would say. It's not for me, but I do like this blend. I do think it's interesting, and if I were a guy or someone who wanted a more masculine fragrance, this is something that I would want to experiment with and try out on skin. It definitely has character. It's very rugged and masculine, I would say. It's almost terpenic to my nose, so it almost has like, yeah, a terpenic sort of like terpene, like paint thinner. Sounds bad, but kind of fragrance to it. Yeah, it's pungent, it's intense in that oud and leather. It's very animalic, even a little bit dirty, and I would never wear this myself personally, both because of that and also how masculine it is to my nose. But there's still something that makes me keep wanting to smell it. You know, it's one of those fragrances where it's not for me. It's very intense, animalic, a bit dirty, but I keep wanting to smell it. So it's very intriguing, very interesting to me. And so if you like those very, very dark, interesting, woody, leathery, masculine fragrances with a little bit of character, check this one out. I gave this a 6 out of 10 out of, sheer respect for this fragrance, even though I would not wear this myself. Like I said, my son gave it a 2 out of 10. So there you go. He didn't have any thoughts. He didn't share any thoughts with me. He just said 2 out of 10. So there you go. Next up, we have Alahine, which is a very powdery rose floral to my nose. My first impression was, that it's a very powdery floral fragrance, a little bit lipsticky. I wasn't sure if there was some iris or violets in there. A little bit vintage, definitely a bit more mature. My son said that it smelled, and I quote, "It smells good and bad at the same time," which y'all tell me if you know what he means, because I know what he means. I know what he means. There's so many of those fragrances out there that smell good and bad at the same time. What do you do with those fragrances? Huh? What do you do with those? There's benzoin in here, which makes it very powdery and ambery to my nose, but very dry. It's a dry, ambery powderiness, which is not my favorite kind of powderiness. I like a more creamy sort of powderiness. It feels very dry to my nose. The ylang opening, it's a quite mature floral opening, the ylang, and it's a very generally warm, woody, ambery, dry down fragrance. Very powdery in that woody amberiness. It gets more woody as it dries down with a tad bit of an incense sort of vibe to it. This is a very classic fragrance to me. Well done, but not for me, not my kind of fragrance. I will say though, I really like the dry down. The far dry down is very pretty, very feminine and powdery, and I really like the dry down. But the opening in the mid is just too a little bit too dry, powdery, classic vintage for me, for my tastes. And I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10 because I think it's very well done. Like I said, just not my kind of fragrance. Next up, we have Lace Garden. And at first spritz, I got a sweet, citrusy, powdery floral, super feminine, a tad bit soapy and clean. This has definitely a blend of ylang ylang and tuberose. It's powdery and very classic again in that vintage sort of way. It has a very strong yellow floral smell to it. That's what I got right away. So it's that ylang in there. It dries down to a very pretty, sweet, honeyed, powdery yellow floral. I gave it, I'm laughing because I just looked at my son's comment, but I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Again, pretty well done, but not necessarily the fragrance for me. My partner, my boyfriend, gave it a 7.5 out of 10, so a higher rating than me, and he says that he really liked it and it reminded him of his aunt's clover honey. So he used to make, when he was a kid, they would make clover honey, not really honey, but they would pick clovers and they would boil them and, make a sort of honey out of it. And so it reminded him of that, which I thought was interesting. I definitely get a honey vibe out of it too, especially in the far dry down. My son said it smells like a bar of soap. So he gave it a 4.5 out of 10. So he definitely got that soapiness out of it. And yeah, it smelled like a bar of soap. So that's Lace Garden. I hope I'm not looking down too much, but I am looking down at my notes because I wrote detailed notes for each one of these fragrances. The next fragrance is Barkhane. And this is a very interesting fragrance because my very first impression of this fragrance when I smelled it was I got black olives, which is so very specific and strange. And I don't know that I've gotten that from a fragrance before. So yeah, very first impression was, wow, that smells like Kalamata Greek black olives. My son said that it smelled like candles. Not sure what he meant by that, but just putting it out there. I got a very woody, ambery, musky, maybe leathery. I wasn't sure. I was feeling like I got some leather in there. Incense, a little bit animalic, and some type of floral. I thought it was maybe rose. Turns out it was geranium, which does have a very similar scent profile to rose. And I smelled the oud in here. Basically the woodiness in here was the oud. This is a very balsamic fragrance. It did take some time for the vanilla to come out. And when it came out, it really added a nice creaminess and balanced out the fragrance, in my opinion. I found this to be very elegant, very refined, very serious, very classy and mature at the same time. I found this to be very unisex, leaning perhaps a little bit masculine, but definitely unisex. And this is something that I would definitely see being a staple fall and winter fragrance. Now, this is not the fragrance for me. This is another fragrance that I much prefer the dry down on, which gets a lot more vanillic, a little bit powdery, slightly sweet and balsamic. I really like that far dry down on Barkhane. However, this is not my kind of fragrance. This is not something I would immediately reach for, and I would probably not wear this myself. That said though, I think that this is a very well done fragrance. Very good quality, very interesting fragrance. And for, like I said, someone who's maybe a little bit more, it's very elegant. It's very refined. Like I said, it's very serious. There's something serious about it to me. And if you like a darker, more balsamic, woody, ambery fragrance with a little bit of vanilla in there, I think this is worth checking out. I gave it a 7 out of 10. My son gave it a 3 out of 10, and he said that it smelled like cigarettes, which I thought was so strange because we don't smoke, and I don't know when he really smells cigarettes, but I guess maybe he got a tobacco vibe out of it. I didn't get tobacco out of it, but interesting nonetheless. So that's Barkhane. Next we have Je Ne Sais Quoi. At first impression was a very powdery, musky, ambery smell that reminded me completely of peanut butter. I was like, it smelled like peanut butter to me. It smelled like peanut butter to me at my first impression. So at first sniff, which is interesting. My son was very surprised by this fragrance. He said that it smelled like noodles, and that it smelled like a perfume he's never smelled in his life before. And he smelled a lot of perfumes now, even at the tender young age of 6. So very unique, very unique. So I found this to be a slightly green, woody, powdery fragrance after the first spritz. A little bit lactonic in the background. I found that it had a very bitter aromatic quality to it that was a little bit similar to the bitter aromatic quality I get in the Majestic Musk by Alexandre J. If you haven't smelled that one, it's not really a musk fragrance. It's more of a very aromatic, powdery vanilla fragrance. And yeah, it's not sweet at all. And I get a bitterness to it. So I get that a little bit in here. I get a green bitter aromaticness to this one. Again, I think there's green tea or there's matcha tea in this one. Yeah, there you go. A lot of mate slash matcha tea. But it does have a creaminess to balance it out, which I really appreciate. And that's what makes me much prefer this green tea to Oha, right? At the beginning that also had green tea. That was green tea and citrus. This one is a lot more approachable to me, a lot more interesting, and a lot more palatable to me. It's very savory all throughout, which is also very unique and interesting. Maybe that's why my son got noodles out of it. Very savory, so not very sweet, more savory. Definitely very unisex. I would not say it leans feminine or masculine, straight down the middle. I love a very good unisex fragrance like that because I find it lends to the person wearing the fragrance rather than the fragrance wearing them more easily. To me, anyway, when it's just perfectly unisex, I just love that. It's a bit addictive, this fragrance. Like I keep wanting to smell it. It has a little bit of that addictive quality to it. And it's certainly unique, but I was not sure if I would wear it regularly or if I would wear it enough. So I gave it a 7 out of 10. So I really enjoyed this, but yeah, I wasn't sure if I would wear this. My son gave it an 8 out of 10. So hey, he gave a better rating than I did. And I would say that this is an all year round fragrance. You can wear this all year round. Could definitely be a signature everyday sort of scent. And the dry down was just this very pretty, delicate, powdery, woody dry down. And I much preferred the dry down, I guess because it didn't have as much of that peanut butter facet in the opening and less of that green, bitter aromaticness from the matcha or the green tea. Yeah, I preferred the dry down to this fragrance. And I will say that the DNA of the Teo Cabanel fragrances is just so beautiful. All of these have a beautiful dry down. Something in the base of these fragrances is just effortless and rich and high quality. And even the fragrances that I liked less, I tended to like them in the dry down. Okay, now we're getting into some of my favorite fragrances out of the bunch. So this is the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The top 6 fragrances out of 13. The next fragrance is Boum. And this is a very bright, happy, uplifting, beachy fragrance. That's what I got at first sniff, at first impression. Very summery, very pretty, very white floral. I maybe got some sandalwood and vanilla in it, and definitely I was like, maybe I get some citrus at the top. I also got something a little bit like gasoline or Sharpie, and I couldn't understand what that was initially. I realized it was the salt. So at first spray, that salt smelled a little bit like gasoline to me, or a Sharpie. I don't know. It's just, honestly, it's because there's a lot of salts in this fragrance. So you know how some fragrances have salt, but I don't know. You wouldn't necessarily guess that there's salt in it, or it's kind of like an afterthought. This one has a lot of salt in it. There's a lot of saltiness in there. And so yeah, when I got that gasoline Sharpie effect, at first I was like, I don't know if that's the alcohol at first spritz, but it wasn't just the alcohol, it was that saltiness. The saltiness came off that way to my nose. And my son said that it smelled like watermelon. So I will say watermelon is one of his favorite fruits, and I thought that was interesting. I didn't get watermelon from it. Maybe he got the watermelon because it's so bright and uplifting. It was very bright and uplifting and summery and a little bit beachy. Those were my very first impressions. I did test this one out on skin. Yeah, so what I got was that very salty white floral, not too sweet, with a subtle vanilla. So definitely not like, say, Olympea, you know, which is another salty vanilla fragrance, but that one, salty white floral vanilla fragrance, that one's a lot sweeter, a lot more perfumey. This one is a lot more subtle, a lot more natural smelling, a little bit more subtle in the vanilla, and not as sweet. It's a very salty white floral to me. The harsh quality in the opening that I got in the opening definitely dissipated within about 5 minutes. And I found that it got slightly warmer and sweeter. The vanilla comes out after the first few minutes. It definitely still stays salty, and it dried down to a very sort of crisp, clean linen by the sea. So I guess the white florals, very clean white florals by the sea with that saltiness and a dash of vanilla. Very nice, very approachable, very, like I said, beachy, summery. I would wear this every day in the summer. Not a year-round fragrance for me. I do think it leans a little feminine, but not overly feminine either. You know what I mean? Not like Olympea, for example, which is definitely very feminine to my nose. So very nice fragrance. I really, really enjoyed this fragrance, and I would definitely wear it. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10, mostly because I wouldn't wear it year-round, I guess. But I really, really like it. 7.5 out of 10. My son gave it a 5.5 out of 10. Didn't really say why, but he gave it a 5.5 out of 10, which by his standards is pretty good, right? The next fragrance I tried and really enjoyed is called Rendez, vous, and this is a very sweet, powdery, girly, floral fragrance, perfect for the springtime, in my opinion. You could wear it spring, summer, perhaps fall as well, but definitely evokes spring to me. My first impression was, okay, this is a citrusy white floral with a soapy edge that dissipated into a bit of creaminess. I could sense some kind of purple flower. I felt like it was like lilac or something. It turns out it was violets. That was the violet I was smelling. It has mimosa in it, which is actually a flower that I'm less familiar with. So it was very interesting to smell this, because then I was like, I really got more acquainted with mimosa. It has a very strong presence with that mimosa, very yellow floral. That is a yellow floral that I was less familiar with. And this is that floral that shines in here. There was no citrus in this fragrance. I get a very sweet, very powdery, very joyful and pretty vibe out of this. Definitely more feminine. And I found that this dried down to a super, super yellow, floral, powdery, sweet fragrance. So I guess it's that mimosa in there, which really, really gets amplified with time. And yeah, definitely spring, summer. I really enjoyed this. On skin, I got a very sweet, floral, feminine fragrance. And I found that the mimosa was very powdery, but it had a sort of citrusy opening to it. Yeah, it had a citrusy, white floral sort of opening to it. Good projection, moderate sillage is what I got out of this fragrance. My son and my partner really loved it and gave it an 8 out of 10. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10, mostly because I guess I had other fragrances that I preferred, but, and it's a little bit too yellow floral for me, but it's very, very pretty, very easy to wear in the spring and summer. And like I said, it definitely evokes spring to me. So that's Rendez, vous. I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Next we have Très French. This is a very fresh, juicy, fruity, clean, feminine spring summer scent for every day. But yeah, it's just a beautiful, sweet, fruity, floral fragrance. At initial spray, right away, I got this very, very juicy, fizzy, huge burst of a juicy pear. And I love that opening in this fragrance. It's absolutely juicy, mouth-watering, and very obviously pear. It's a very fresh and aquatic pear. It's a little bit musky. The pear opening in this reminded me a bit of the pear opening in Clean Radiant Skin, but more white floral, a little bit greener, a little bit fresher, and less musky. So yeah, this is very fresh. It's bright. It's not too green. Very safe and feminine. Did I say pretty? This is just super pretty. This is pretty in a bottle, you guys. This only loses marks for me because I find that it lacks a little bit of originality, and I already have similar scents to this, but this is a no-brainer kind of scent for me. This is an easy reach spring summer fragrance. It's very uplifting, very bright, very feminine and cheerful, and I like that. One thing I didn't really like was that I found that as it dried down, it did get a little bit greener, which I don't like as much. And I did try this one on skin, of course, and on skin I got that juicy pear, that fresh juicy pear in the opening. Just it's one of the best openings. I love it so much. It's sweet, it's a little bit tart, it's aquatic and earthy at the same time. It's very realistic pear to my nose. And then I get a clean white floral freshness. So very easy to love fragrance for me, very feminine, very easy to wear, everyday spring and summer fragrance. I gave it a 7.5 on 10. I could have given it an 8, honestly. Anyway, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10, and my son gave it a 5 on 10. Not sure why. A little blah kind of rating there, you know? But really, really enjoyed this fragrance, and that is Très French. Okay, we are now in my top 3 fragrances, you guys. My goodness, top 3 fragrances. So the next fragrance I have here is called Voilà. And my first impression of this was so interesting because the notes I got were so wrong. They were not that. But I will share it with you. So my first impression was, wow, this was a very creamy coconut. I thought it was pretty and feminine, and I got a creamy coconut. So wrong. This is a creamy, powdery orris root. So it's that buttery, creamy orris, if you know what I mean. That's what gave me that coconut vibe, and sandalwood. So it does have a creaminess to it, a creamy powderiness to it. It is very nutty. There's hazelnut at the top, and it's a little bit earthy to my nose, slightly earthy, but it's very buttery and soft, very creamy, buttery, not milky though, you know, it's buttery, creamy and soft. It leans a little bit feminine to my nose, but it's quite unisex. All year round fragrance. This to me is a absolute like staple, signature, everyday fragrance you can wear all year round. On my skin, in the opening, I get a sort of earthy, powdery sandalwood, and then it gets a bit nutty. It gets more buttery as it dries down, more buttery and creamy and nutty, very, very smooth as it dries down, with slightly more sweetness as it dries down. The buttery nuttiness is very gourmand in a savory sort of way to me, which is very interesting and very unique, I think. I think that's hard to do. You know, usually gourmand goes sweet, but it's gourmand in a very balanced kind of way, a little bit savory, with just a touch of sweetness. Very beautiful. The powderiness from the woodiness in this fragrance does have a bit of a paper-like sort of quality to it. And I'm also getting a bit of an earthy quality from the orris root in this. This is on the lower end of projection and sillage with moderate lasting power. It definitely dries down to a faint skin scent, and it's great for everyday low-key wear. This could make a great signature scent as well. Perfect for everyday, all occasions, I would say, all casual occasions, I would say, could easily be a signature scent. And this is a perfect everyday fall scent. So like a perfect everyday signature fall scent, in my opinion. That's when I would wear it the most. And I really, really enjoyed this fragrance. I would describe it as a buttery, nutty, woody, clean fragrance. Clean, everyday fall fragrance. And I gave it an 8 out of 10, and my son gave it a 9 out of 10. So he really liked this one. The next fragrance I have to share with you, the top two, right? The top two. So this is one of the fragrances that was sent to me because it was one of my favorite fragrances. And this is Café Cabanel. I have it right over here. And this is a beautiful, warm, spicy, sweet, lactonic gourmand. A little bit smoky. Perfect for the fall and winter time. This is just mouth-watering and gourmand. Yeah. This, at my very first impression, right away, I got some coffee, some woodiness, and some caramel, which is what gave it some sweetness. A bit gourmand and creamy, lactonic from the get-go. This is a creamy, rich, lactonic coffee with hints of caramel to add some sweetness. It has a warm spiciness from the cinnamon in here without any sharpness, which doesn't always happen as well. So very smooth. And what I got from this too was like creamy coffee ice cream, which is so specific, but that's kind of what it evokes for me. Like melted, creamy, rich coffee ice cream. So it is warm though. It's not that it smells cold, but in terms of like where the gourmandness goes, that's what I imagine. I don't necessarily imagine a warm cup of coffee. It's like the taste or the smell, the taste smell of like very rich, creamy coffee ice cream. So I do get a lot of the cinnamon in here, and it's really, really beautiful with that coffee and caramel. And that butteriness, I guess, is what's giving me that ice creamness. Like that's the lactonic element in there. It's butter, I think. In the opening, it does have some citrus that kind of cuts into the sweet gourmand lactonicness of the fragrance. And it's absolutely intoxicating. It's an intoxicating fragrance. On skin, I get that citrus, warm, spicy, creamy, lactonic, gourmand, caramelized coffee. And I found that the opening was a bit woody as well. This has very moderate projection and sillage in my opinion, and none of these are like beast mode fragrances. I think mainly because, like I said, these are very natural fragrances for the most part. They smell natural as well. There's nothing harsh about these fragrances. And so even though this is a very strong fragrance, like as a type of smell, it's a strong fragrance and it's a dark fragrance. It is very moderate in terms of projection, in terms of sillage, in terms of lasting power. I'm quite happy with the performance. I don't need it to be a beast performer, but yeah, I'd say it's very moderate all around. This is definitely a fall and winter fragrance. I wouldn't wear this in the spring and summer probably. You can do what you want, of course, and you can probably get away with it in the spring as well, but this is definitely screaming fall and winter, absolutely. And actually a great holiday scent as well. Like maybe, I guess, because of that cinnamon in there. Cinnamon just screams like Christmas time to me for some reason as well. I've just noticed that that's one of my favorite notes for the fall and holiday times. And yeah, just scrumptious, intoxicating, lactonic, creamy coffee, warm, spicy cinnamon fragrance. Absolutely intoxicating. That's Café Cabanel. I gave this one a 8.5 out of 10, and my son gave it so specific. My son gave it a 5.8. He didn't want to tell me why, but he gave it a 5.8 out of 10. And then finally, my favorite fragrance, my top fragrance. I mean, Café Cabanel is pretty much the top two, but yeah, is Voilà by Teo Cabanel, and here you can see it as well. This beautiful, very simple, clear bottle is very representative of the fragrance, and just like it's representative of the fragrance, actually, you can see the cap is, even though it seems like it's just beige, it's actually very nuanced. It has a lot of different shades in it, and yeah, it's just very, very like, has different kinds of beige shades, very understated, very elegant, and that is the fragrance. This is a very clean, pretty, skin-like everyday fragrance. It's very powdery. At first spritz, I will take you through my journey again, because at this point now I've been wearing it a lot and I really enjoy it. but I will take you back to my first spritz. At first spritz, I really got a sweet woody floral musk, and I will say woody floral musks are some of my favorite fragrances to begin with. I got a sort of clean, laundry, fresh powderiness to it, and I just loved it at first sniff. I definitely got some aldehydes in there, some soapy white florals, some musk and sandalwood, and that is what I got out of it. It dries down on the paper, super powdery and musky and fresh at the same time, with a very subtle sandalwood. On skin, I got a very fresh aldehydic burst with the clean, fresh sheet smell. So like clean laundry. And then some clean musks coming in, which, by the way, these are also, I don't know too much about this side of perfumery, but these are apparently clean musks, as in like not damaging to your health or the environment. So I get those clean musks in there and some soft white florals. This makes an excellent, great signature scent year round. That's probably one of my favorite parts about this fragrance, is that I knew right away instantaneously that this is something I could wear every day, any day, like all year round. And I just love the way it makes me feel. This is definitely a moderate projection fragrance. It has very good sillage though, and it has very good lasting power. So very interestingly, even though this is a kind of like low key sort of fragrance, I found that with wearing it over time, like it gets amplified. I don't know if it's like on my skin, it amplifies, but it has good projection, it has good sillage, great lasting power. And yeah, I do think you really need to like a powdery fragrance, because this fragrance evolves. The opening is very aldehydic, very clean, fresh, and aldehydic. It's not powdery from the get-go, but the powderiness and the muskiness comes out later. And when it comes out full force. Very powdery, very musky, and just beautiful, beautiful fragrance. My partner said it smelled very fresh out of the shower. That's the kind of fragrance impression he got from this. It's a very fresh, out of the shower sort of scent. Very light and airy is how he described it. He gave it a 7 out of 10. My son said it reminded him of the moon. You guys, like how romantic, how poetic is my son? He said it reminded him of the moon. And you know what? I think he's right. I think he's the winner here, you guys. It reminded him of the moon, which I think is so interesting. I think, you know, the way I described it actually would fit with the moon. Beautiful fragrance. I gave this an 8.5 out of 10. I could have given it a 9, you guys. I was trying to be like strict, you know, like critical, like, you know, but I could have given it a 9. I could have given it a 9.5, you know. Anyway, this one and Café Cabanel are just such beautiful fragrances, total polar opposites. Like I said, this one here is definitely an everyday, clean, fresh, musky, powdery scent, very powdery. Definitely unisex, but leaning feminine to my nose, definitely leaning feminine. This one I would say is unisex, very unisex. If I had to say, I would say it's maybe leaning a little bit masculine, Café Cabanel, but it's pretty unisex. And if I had to say, I would say this is a little bit leaning feminine. Yeah, definitely leaning feminine, et voilà. Definitely because of those white florals in the background as well. They smell a bit more feminine, and the powderiness as well. Other than that, nothing overtly feminine about it. Beautiful fragrances. Highly recommend both of these fragrances. Please let me know down below which one sounds like the one for you, which one you're most interested in trying out. I would love to know your thoughts on any of these. Let me know if you like this kind of house overview as well, and I will do more of these. They do take more time for me to do because I really want to give each fragrance its fair shot. But I can also do these sort of like as first impressions on camera as well, which I would enjoy doing, and I think they're also pretty entertaining to watch myself. So I have thought of doing that. I'm thinking of doing it for Atelier Materi. I think that's how you say it, Atelier Materi. Let me know if you'd be interested in that, and I will do that on camera first impressions. Thank you so much to Teo Cabanel for sending these fragrances over. I am so happy that I was able to share these with you guys, and I hope that you found something in there that you would be interested in trying out. You can definitely check out their website and try out any of their fragrances. They do have samples as well. I am not sponsored by them. I do not at this time have any kind of affiliate code or link. If ever that changes in the future, I will let you know. And thank you so much for watching. Until we see each other again, take care of yourself. I'll see you very soon. Bye.